Hi, I hope you are well wherever you are. Happy Friday, since this is when the episode is coming out, but happy whatever day it is that you're listening to this. I want to use this episode to talk a little bit about sexuality, specifically mine, because that's my story. I think there's a lot of confusion around sexuality, especially if you happen to be somebody who is not in the LGBTQIA plus community. And I just want to have like a very human conversation about it and kind of answer any questions that I get asked a lot. And maybe it'll help answer some of yours if you have any and you're listening to this. So it wasn't until a couple years ago, maybe less than that, I heard about the term pansexual. Okay. And I was like, what the heck is that? And then I read about it. And it's basically this idea that you just love people and it's not based off of what's in their pants, right? Because there's this, I find it to be a truth, but sexuality and gender are very different things, right? And so pansexual really just means that you love people without their gender playing a part. And I had an aha moment. I was like, oh my gosh, there's a name for me. There's a title for me. Thank goodness. That's always what I wanted is a title. It's actually the last thing I've ever wanted is to be labeled or titled or anything. But I have always been attracted to men and women. And that's men identifying and women identifying, right? I've never I've never just looked for one. So, everybody always asks like, what was that like coming out? And I never had a quote, like coming out experience. I never had that because I've always just kind of loved who I've loved. And it didn't really matter whether they identified as a male or female. If I vibed with that person and there was a connection there and a chemistry, that is what mattered. So I married a man. I obviously had a child with another man. And then I fell in love with Breezy. And people always get so shocked about this when I tell them, but I say, I didn't fall in love with Breezy because she's a woman. I fell in love with Breezy because Breezy is the coolest freaking person I've ever met. And she's gorgeous and she has a good heart. And it just so happens that she's a woman. And Beans, Britt Barron, I call her Beans. Beans and I talked about that on the episode. She fell in love with Sammy, and Sammy happened to be a woman. And that I think is just such a powerful thing that a lot of people, especially those who aren't in the LGBTIA plus community, and I will be the first to say it, that there are people that are in this community that shame people for not understanding. And that will never be me. I'm not a shamer. I don't care where you come from and what, you believe to be the truth. Like I will listen. I will always listen. And I think that it's an honest question because if you're not in the community, this idea that somebody can just fall in love with somebody and it doesn't matter what's in their pants can actually sound kind of foreign, but it's true. I mean, I didn't fall in love with Jason because Jason was a man. I fell in love with Jason because Jason was kind and he was funny and we had good conversation. He also happened to be a man with a penis that I had a baby with. So I think that sexuality is it's such a spectrum and it's very fluid. And so the other point about that I really wanted to talk about today was this idea that if you are lesbian identifying or you are bisexual or pansexual or if you are gay, transgender, all of those are different things. Myself as a lesbian or a pansexual human, it took me a while to understand transgender. And I had to ask questions and I had to learn and I had to have conversations with my transgender friends about their experience. So I'm hoping that today this empowers you, that if you have somebody in your life that is in the LGBTQIA plus community and you don't quite understand, ask. And also, if you do have, let's say you know me in real life and you know my story, that does not mean you know the story of all lesbians or all pansexual identifying humans, right? If you know one gay man, you don't know the story of all gay men. And I think that as a society, if we get better at listening and asking questions and being very, very invested in the answers, we're just going to get to a place where we understand people a lot more. You know, I love talking to Britt because we agree on, we have such beautiful conversations, but hearing her say that she fell in love with Sammy and Sammy happened to be a woman and that rocked her world. It's not like she woke up one day and said, I'm going to choose to love a woman. That's oftentimes not what happens. Sure, there are people. I have friends that have never, I have very good friends, lesbian friends that have never slept with a man because they knew that they were into women. And that's another type, that's another place on the sexuality spectrum, right? It's a huge spectrum. I had a conversation a couple years ago with a friend and we talked about transgender. And there were a lot of questions around if you are transgender, like, and let's say you're a man and you're married to a woman and then you come out as transgender and then you're still interested in women. And there was a lot of confusion around that. And I had just learned all of this myself. And I think what it came down to was gender and sexuality are not on the same spectrum. Gender's on its own spectrum, sexuality's on its own spectrum. So you have somebody, who is a man and transitions to a woman because they are transgender. That doesn't mean that their sexuality is going to change. If that person is interested in women before, chances are they're still going to be interested in women. So I just want you to ask questions. I just want us all to get to a place where we feel comfortable asking questions. And for those of us that are in the community, I want us to get better at understanding that people don't always understand and be able to listen and receive questions and answer them in a non-condescending way. That's my hope. And I'm not saying like put up with hate. Like I have a zero tolerance policy for hate, zero tolerance. But what I do have a huge tolerance for is honest, genuine questions. Seek to understand, not to be understood. Like I said, I didn't fall in love with Breezy because she's a woman. I fell in love with Breezy because she's the most incredible human. And she happens to be a woman, So that's what I wanted to share with you today, because I think if we can all just get better at asking questions and seeking to understand, that leads us toward that most acoustic life, that ability to have honest, genuine relationships with people and not be like uncomfortable or have anxiety around people because we just don't understand them. If you don't understand someone or their choices, ask. Listen to stories. See if somebody has a story that needs to be shared and then listen. That's what this whole podcast is about. So I'm really loving it. And I'm so grateful to Beans for sharing her heart earlier this week. And it reminds me of Brian's episode too. Just sharing his heart was so beautiful. I hope this was helpful. We'll be back on Tuesday with another episode. Until then, have a beautiful day. Love you.